from the high desert and the great American Southwest. I bid you good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. This is Midnight in the Desert, taking back the night. I'm Art Bell. Good evening, everybody. Linda Moulton Howe is our guest tonight, and she's got some stuff tonight that, frankly, is going to curl your blood. You know, I'm going to curl your blood a little too. Lots of big information. She'll probably start out talking about the New Horizons mission. There's some stuff you don't know about. Boy, they're making discoveries daily, and these things that are being discovered don't make any sense, frankly. But I guess that's what discovery is all about, right? And then she's going to be talking about a couple of things that are really scary. And one is in Rhode Island, they're getting these big booms. I'm sure you've heard them, right? Boom. All of a sudden you're sitting in your house and boom. Well, they're getting such big booms there that there's a lady who got tossed like 10 feet into the air, broke bones and all that. She'll talk about that. And then also, we may be in the middle of a magnetic field reversal. You're going to want to hear about that. And then finally, this one's really hard for me. You know I'm a cat guy, right? We've got Dolly, Abby. Some of you may not know, Yeti passed. It was very, very difficult. So I'm a cat guy, and this last story is just horrible. But Linda will cover it. And now I've got one just briefly to curl your blood. It certainly curled mine. If this doesn't do it, I don't know what will. Like thousands of everyday devices, from coffee makers, power plants, cars, increasingly everything is, we know now, connected to what? The Internet. This enables drivers to stream music, watch videos, and use GPS, even listen to this program. But it also exposes their cars, and therefore the drivers as well, to, brace yourself, hackers. The hackers exploited a weak spot in something called Uconnect. That's an Internet-connected feature on about 471,000 Fiat Chrysler late-model automobiles, most of them in the U.S. Using a laptop computer and a burner phone, they were able to send a series of commands to the car. The Uconnect computers are linked directly to the Internet by Sprint's cellular network. The bottom line is, from wherever they care, with a laptop computer, they could do things like make your windshield wipers go, make the spray come up, confuse you, turn your radio on, change the station, but it gets worse. They can turn your engine off. Imagine that, 75 miles an hour on the freeway. It gets worse. If you're in reverse, they can take over your steering wheel. Good Lord. So that's the kind of world we live in right now, and that got me thinking. I am convinced, personally, I understand the big media didn't cover it, but I think that Anonymous took down Wall Street. They didn't report it. I know. But there were all kinds of legit messages up on the Internet showing a message that came the night before from Anonymous saying Wall Street is going to have a difficult day tomorrow. So I've got a request. I want somebody from Anonymous. I want to interview somebody from Anonymous. Now, I know this is a fraught with danger request. Probably for me personally, but I want to interview somebody from Anonymous. I've seen a number of their statements on the Internet. This is a really, really serious group of really serious people. And I don't know how we're going to accomplish it. I would assume Anonymous has the ability to probably, A, disguise their voice, and B, disguise their origin. They could come in by computer. See what I mean? I'm a little concerned about that. Or they could come in on the phone or through, bounces or I don't know. But I'd like to get somebody from Anonymous. So if anybody can help me out with that, please do. I'm Art Bell at artbell.com. you can send me a message, which I'll probably be afraid to respond to. Okay, so there is that. Now, very quickly, rules of the show, very quickly, no bad language, only one call per show. If you're able to do it, for heaven's sakes, put Skype on your phone, whatever kind of smartphone you've got, put it on your phone, because that is a cool way to call the show. Now, if you want to really sound good, that'll do the trick, trust me. So, everybody stay right where you are, because coming up in just a moment is Linda Moulton Howe, and she is going to have an awful lot to say. She's got so much cool stuff to talk about. You're not going to want to miss a minute of it. Stay right where you are. Incarnation. And apparently sometime before any incarnation. At 36 years investigating this, really?
And it doesn't even seem like that. That is a number when we think of the cycle of time. It has one meaning, but for me, it has all been linked to one overpowering and driving question. If what I was exposed to in the animal mutilations back in 1979 to 80, when I was producing A Strange Harvest, the documentary for the CBS station in Denver, and law enforcement are the ones who first said to me, Linda, the perpetrators of the animal mutilations are creatures from outer space, I had to go through that strange sense of being hit with a 220-volt circuit and not prepared for the thinking that I would have to go through when I was making A Strange Harvest about what are we dealing with? Is it evil? Is it good? Does it have survival problems? How long has it been here? Why are we here? Is it true what some say in the abduction syndrome and government documents that we were made by something in the non-human category? All of that hit me in the year 79 to 80 working on that documentary and later. And once you've been exposed to, I'm just going to boil it down, that it all comes down to, Art, who are we, Homo sapiens sapien, in this whole strange planet where many people feel disconnected. Mm-hmm. And we look out on the universe, and some people are haunted, as if there is something in their gut, in their very soul, that says, I come from someplace else. You find a lot of that in the abduction syndrome. And you put it all together, and going forward one step at a time for 36 years, which in many ways seems such a short time for me, it is, what does our government, the UK government, all of the allies of World War II, who clearly 60 years ago made a policy of denial that the world should not know the fact that we are not alone in this universe, and that's something that they referred to as an alien presence, celestial beings, extraterrestrial biological entities. All of it came into documents that have been leaked. There have been whistleblowers who have talked before they died. And it all comes down to 2015, July 22nd, as you and I are speaking, that in all of this arc of time, there has been growing pressure, just like the planetary ice bodies in which water appears to be coming, that I'm going to talk about also because it's exciting, but that this pressure that has been growing by so many people, men, women, and children, who have been exposed to something that has truly been in a category that they knew in their lives was not human, and they were afraid to talk. And what has been happening in just the last, I would say, 5 years in my career of those 36 years, that I have felt such anger that has been suppressed in a lot of people who have worked in military or in intelligence. And their anger is, as one man said to me, I joined the military in innocence. I was assigned to subjects and duties and activities in which I was sworn never to talk to anybody, not anyone in my family. And then, Linda, I hear you on the radio. I see your books. I see your documentaries. And you have everything, not just me, but meaning the universal you of those of us who are trying to come up with facts on what has been hidden by policies of denial, and that they say, we feel like that before we die, we must tell you and others because we're living a lie.
I do understand that feeling, Linda. Every single one of those questions you enumerated all remain open in terms of the public. You know, but I wonder this, Linda, as you listed all of those questions, have you personally come to be able to answer affirmatively for yourself? I mean, beyond any shadow of a doubt, or not?
That there are extraterrestrial biological entities?
Yes.
That there are other dimensional beings, that there are timelines, that we're in a very complex cosmos.
Yes.
All of those are being used by, well, let's make one big word, other intelligences. And your friend and mine, Michio Kaku, would say, we're in a universe old enough to have 3 or 4 generations of intelligences in that 13.9 billion light years. And that the oldest would have the likely ability to harness energy from suns, be able to neutralize gravity, be able to project holograms in front of us that we would never know that it was something not of this earth if they chose to. And
type 3, I think, godlike, he says. Linda, so you personally have become convinced?
Yeah, because of the people who have shown me a lot of things and talked to me before they died is a big category. And they had nothing to gain. And I have been able to see some things that I still have not been able to make public. And in the process of all of that, it drives me to want to keep going forward, trying to have the pressure of fact, not innuendo, not maybes, but bring to bear the pressure of fact that we are on an earth in which there have been all kinds of concocted histories and concocted mythologies that have served certain minorities long ago, and perhaps in World War II. The governments that were in the Allies, they may have thought that they were super patriots to say, the world isn't ready for this. Everything will collapse. We can't introduce extraterrestrials. We've just come out of World War II. And so they would have looked at a policy of denial and secrecy, and let's get this extraterrestrial technology and let's back engineer it and let's get it into American corporations and no one will ever know, and we'll keep it out of the perceived hands of our enemies, such as the Soviet Union. But once a government that is supposed to be a democratic republic of, by, and for the people suddenly has a black underbelly that is dedicated, that everything it does is secret. There is no congressional oversight. There's no taxpayer oversight. There's no oversight. And you take 60 years of those kinds of off-the-books agencies who may have thought in the beginning they were super patriots. Today, I think it is at the root of why the United States is so off track.
Well, Linda, a lot gets done in the name of patriotism, doesn't it?
Well, I guess that is one way to sum it up, but I think that if you consider a larger universe, I just don't think, just as in the crop formations that have come half a dozen times over the last 20-some years, where there have been some kind of efforts for language or binary code in the crop formations.
Would a real patriot, Linda, object to having their phone calls and their emails monitored by the NSA?
I don't know, but what I was going to say is that all of these crop formations that have had language and binary code, the translations are and have been repeated. We oppose deception. Mm-hmm. And so if we are dealing on a planet where it's very complex and there may not be one agenda, I doubt that. I can tell you that I think there are mixed agendas. Then that in and of itself complicates all these matters of trying to explain to a world family, here is the truth, because there may not be a single truth.
Right.
But does that mean, Art, that we should all buy in to living on a concocted planet?
No, but if they oppose deception, they better not make contact with our political structure. That's what I think.
Okay, well, let's switch tracks to something that's exciting and positive in the context that I have no doubt that we certainly have other intelligence in this universe, and that as we're moving out into our own solar system in getting further and now finally out to nearly the Kuiper Belt, and dear once upon a time lonely Pluto that everybody thought if we ever did get there, we would just be looking at something like a billiard ball.
Yeah, isn't that what it should be? I mean, Linda, it's really way out there. It's in the dark. It's freezing cold. It should be nothing but, as you said, a billiard ball. But
it's 3.6 billion miles from where we are right now on Earth. But Pluto has shocked everyone. Yesterday, I talked with the New Horizons project scientist Hal Weaver, and he's at Johns Hopkins University, and he works in the Applied Physics Laboratory there in Baltimore. And he said to me, who would ever expect ice mountains on Pluto? Is just blowing my mind. And he's one of the scientists who is helping manage the whole New Horizons program. Well, what has blown him away and all of the other New Horizons scientists and all of us who have been watching and tracking with this is that since that July 14th, when it was that historic close flyby, and the New Horizons spacecraft got about 7,700 miles above Pluto's surface, they weren't looking at a white billiard ball. This planet, keep in mind, which has been knocked down to a dwarf planet because it's so far out there and small, and the International Astronomical Union in 2006 decided it was too small and far away to be a planet, although that may change. But let's just say it got knocked down to a dwarf planet because it's only about 1,500 miles in diameter, a little less. And yet, when New Horizons flew by and they came in with that first video, we're looking at 2-mile-high mountains, and it has to be solid water ice, Art, because that's the only thing that would be like rock to go up 2 miles.
Linda, how much gravity would Pluto have? Any thoughts compared to Earth?
Well, I can't fill in a figure, but it's only 1,500 miles in diameter. The Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter.
Right.
We have a very active and core in the Earth, and we have mantle, and it's hugely a rocky planet. When you go to the density of Pluto, which they did measure on this close flyby, and it turns out, in fact, it was Professor Weaver told me that they now think that Pluto is about 55% ice and 45% rocky material. Wow. So, and then Charon, it's we'll call it its sidekick. It's almost like two little planets as opposed to a planet and a moon. But Charon is about 1/2 the size of Pluto. It's also its density is extremely light. And when you think about the fact that Pluto is out there and it has this little solar system of its own going around it, you've got Charon, you've got Hydra, Nix, Styx, and Kerberos. Those are the 5 moons around Pluto. And it almost seems like an insult astronomically to have demoted Pluto with its own little solar system out there so far from the Earth to a dwarf planet. And as some of the planetary scientists on the New Horizons mission have been saying, we're looking at a system out there in which the surface topography of Pluto has to be considered planetary because you have 2-mile mountains, and that we haven't even gone to this big question. If there are 2-mile mountains and that the surface is a minus around Pluto, minus average global temperature is minus 390 degrees Fahrenheit.
Holy smokes.
So whatever is in liquid form, it has to be mixed with something like ammonia to make, like an antifreeze you'd put in your car in the winter.
Yes.
It's true. And then it can stay liquid down much colder than what ice freezes on Earth at kind of an average of 32 degrees Fahrenheit if it's fresh water, and a different temperature if it's salt water. But if the liquid on Pluto were not like sort of an antifreeze, it couldn't stay on the surface long enough to build up those 2-mile mountains, because you stand back from that video and those photos and you say, what could shove up liquid?
Energy, lots and lots and lots of energy from somewhere.
Well, it's 11,000 feet up, and something forced it. And as Professor Weaver, when we were talking about this, he said, nobody would think there can't be plate tectonics on Pluto like there is on the Earth.
No.
So what in the world would be the energy that could force anything that I'm assuming it has to be coming from below the icy surface? And it is something that has caused this range of these tall mountains. And it's very interesting when you look at the photo of the big pale heart, that big pale heart, and I've got that at earthfiles.com, my news website, with some orientation. The place where the 2-mile-high ice mountains are is over to, if you're looking at the heart, it would be over to the left, where the it looks like dark seatbelt coming around that lower half of Pluto,
right.
and the black, we'll call them, they look sort of like a belt. They come around right to where the big white heart narrows down. And I asked Professor Weaver, what could the blackness be and the whiteness of this heart-shaped? And it was such an interesting idea.
Well, what did he say?
Well, when you look out at, say, Neptune, and there is a planet there that is Triton, and they used to be very puzzled by black lines that were on Triton. And they finally came to the conclusion that in some of these areas where, for example, Pluto has a nitrogen, methane, and some carbon monoxide in its atmosphere. Well, it doesn't sit there just by itself. You have solar energy coming from the sun. You have gamma rays coming from the cosmos. You have cosmic rays. You have all these things, and when they interact with these particular kind of nitrogen, methane, carbon molecules, they transform into something called tholins, Tholins. It's really a bit like hydrocarbon.
Okay, we're coming up on break pretty quickly. So the energy is what?
The black belt, they think, are these tholins, and the question about the whole topography is what could possibly be at the center of Pluto providing the energy for all this.
All right, hold tight, Linda. We'll be right back. Yes.
For Dark Matter News, I'm Leo Ashcraft. As automobile manufacturers add more and more special features to their cars, the systems that these vehicles rely on become more and more complex and also more and more vulnerable to outside tampering. Now, hundreds of thousands of vehicles produced by one major manufacturer are vulnerable to remote hacking that can take over critical systems like brakes, steering, and transmission. An ongoing investigation into the security of Chrysler vehicles bears some pretty startling conclusions. In a couple of weeks, security researchers will reveal the details of a zero-day exploit that affects some 471,000 cars. Put bluntly, hackers can take complete control of the cars from thousands of miles away. For now, owners of vehicles with the Uconnect feature should install the update as soon as possible. The patch must be manually installed via USB stick or by dealership mechanics. Many researchers have come to the conclusion that human beings are not from Earth. After a balloon came back from a high-altitude flight, it was covered with microscopic life forms that originated from space, fueling debate about whether life on Earth began here or elsewhere in space. Other scientists have argued that life originated on Mars due to a mineral found in Martian meteorites, a concept that is crucial for the genesis of life. Another experiment showed that amino acids could have arrived with comet impacts, suggesting life could be widespread in our solar system. A new book by American ecologist Dr. Ellis Silver, Humans Are Not From Earth, looks at things differently. The author argues that humans may not be natives to Earth and may have arrived separately from elsewhere. Silver provides arguments based on human physiology, suggesting that we have not evolved along with other life forms on Earth, but that we actually come from elsewhere in the universe, brought here by extraterrestrial beings tens of thousands of years ago. This is Dark Matter News. Robotic surgery. It's on the rise as doctors look to make procedures less invasive. But according to a new study, the strategy comes with some risks. Looking at more than 10,000 incident reports from the FDA spanning from 2000 to 2013, researchers found that robots were involved in 144 patient deaths and 1,391 patient injuries. For most of the reports involving death, very little information was shared on why the patient died, meaning it's difficult to say whether it was human error, a problem with the robot, or the risks inherent in surgery. Overall, the study found 550 error reports per 100,000 surgical procedures involving robots, most of them not resulting in death or injury. The search for intelligent life in the universe is getting an injection of resources, brains, and money from Silicon Valley. Tech investor Yuri Milner, alongside physicist Stephen Hawking and famed astrophysicist and cosmologist Lord Martin Reeves, announced the breakthrough initiatives on Monday. Over the next 10 years, Milner will invest some $100 million. It will give scientists access to powerful technology, including some of the best telescopes in the world. Milner said that the idea is to bring a Silicon Valley-type approach to the research. It'll be able to gather more data in a single day than any previous search gathered in an entire year. Its scope will include 1 million nearby stars, the galactic center, 100 nearby galaxies, and the entire plane of the Milky Way. All the data collected will be open to the public, and the hardware and open-source software will be compatible with telescopes around the world so other countries and researchers can join the research. Breakthrough Listen will team up with SETI at Home, an existing platform of 9 million computers that lets citizen scientists participate in the quest by donating spare computing power. I'm Leo Ashcraft for Dark Matter News.
In the podcast, no, we can't. And if we did, the music industry would cause us to have to charge you about $50 to hear it. So sorry about that. However, I am informed that our newscast, by popular demand, and I mean popular demand, is going to go into the podcast. So they're so good. Leo's newscasts are so good that they're going to go into the podcast. And with that, back now to Linda Moulton Howe. Hi, Linda.
Hi. And before the break, we were talking about 2 Mile High Mountains, and we didn't talk about the fact that they have not found a single crater yet on Pluto. That means that something is filling in the craters and resurfacing it. Scientists think that Pluto might not be older than 100 million years in this 4.6 billion-year-old solar system, meaning that the surface is that young because something is resurfacing. Well,
like an extraterrestrial road crew, you mean?
Well, no, we left on the question what would be the energy source to make these 2 Mile mountains. Well, now add filling in the craters, and I can tell you at least one hypothesis that does not answer, and that is, some people have said, well, maybe there are tidal forces out there, but they have found and done the math, and that little solar system around Pluto that I was talking about with Sharon and the others, it cannot explain tidal forces because the center of gravity in their masses is outside those planets, and it would not have the same kind of friction that happens, say, at Jupiter when you have the 4 big moons there and they dance around each other, and Europa and Io, they get a lot of heat from tidal forces. It doesn't happen at Pluto, making this even that much more mysterious, and there is another missing, refilling mystery, and that is that current estimates by the scientists are that 500 tons of nitrogen are leaving Pluto's atmosphere every hour. Every hour. Now, what in the world could be replacing all of that nitrogen, because they know that there's nitrogen in that atmosphere, and so now one of the other big mysteries is what internal process can generate heat to create liquid ice water that makes those mountains and fills those craters, and somehow something is generating nitrogen as fast as the nitrogen is hit by solar winds and it hits Pluto's atmosphere and knocks that nitrogen out. Something is replenishing it.
So right now, Linda, it's the impossible.
Well, no, it's fascinating because we've never been to a little world like this, but this isn't the only mystery. Pluto is classified as a dwarf planet. Well, if you come into the solar system going toward the sun, you go 3 planets over to Saturn. You pass Neptune and Pluto and Neptune. You get to Saturn, and Uranus is there. You get to Saturn, and the 6th largest moon, it's called Enceladus.
Enceladus, yes.
It, right now, believe it or not, more perhaps than Europa, more perhaps than Titan, it might be one of the keys to finding other life in our solar system.
Why?
Because it has a huge ocean in the southern hemisphere. NASA confirmed that last year with a gravity investigation. And then in the last 5 or 6 months, there has been a report from scientists who have found silica on Earth. Silica would be like beach sand. Mm-hmm. They have found microscopic and little larger pieces of silica extending far out from Enceladus. And when they work backwards in math, what they conclude is all of those vents, when you see those beautiful photographs from NASA and Cassini of the beautiful vents coming from Enceladus, that's that moon of Saturn, and it's water vapor. We flew craft right through that water vapor, and it is mostly water vapor. It surprised some people. Well, the scientists have worked backwards from the height and the strength with which those geysers come up blasting through the ice of Enceladus, and they go down to the bottom of that ocean, and they conclude that for all of the physics to make sense, the temperature at the bottom of the South Pole Ocean must be 194 degrees Fahrenheit.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy smokes. So, in other words, and if you were to then get away from the center really hot place, at some point, you'd get to a comfortable temperature?
Well, here, if you got 194 degrees down, it may be 30 miles deep, and you've got 194 degrees Fahrenheit at the bottom. And so that is building up pressure, is the hypothesis that is causing these vents to explode through that ice. And when it goes, it's basically turning into vapor and sublimating, and that the silica would be what has been vented from rocky material on the bottom of that ocean, just like we'd go out to an ocean and walk and our feet would feel sand in the bottom, and that it's been blown out, and that combination of that kind of heat going all the way up in a deep water. In Earth, we have these tube worms that like to be around the hot vents in our own Earth ocean.
That's right.
What could be around the heat in that ocean in the southern pole of Enceladus? And that's a moon of Saturn. And we haven't even talked about Ceres. Ceres is a dwarf planet in the category of Pluto. And everybody probably listening has heard about the bright lights in that crater.
Oh, the lights, yes.
Well, whatever they are.
Yeah,
bright spots.
whatever.
Bright spots. 55-mile diameter crater, 6 miles of these bright spots. It's still a mystery. And this week, the Dawn spacecraft started going down. It's a spiraling orbit, and it will continue now until about the 1st of August. And it is going to go down to 932 miles above the surface.
And we're going to get really good pictures.
And if it's not close enough to have a small enough pixel definition in that first week of August, it begins to spiral down again. And in December, our Dawn spacecraft will be 235 miles above the surface of Ceres, this strange dwarf planet with one single 3-mile mountain. One.
Okay, well, you know, Linda, that's close enough for our military satellites to read license plates, so...
Lower than the ISS.
Yes, yes.
And here's a kicker, though. I was talking with Professor Russell about this, and would we then be able to definitively say what these bright spots in the crater are? If we can't do it in August, what about December? And he said, well, one of the problems is the camera, that the smallest pixel will be about 121 miles on a side because of the way that the camera was built. He said we could have had a more refined one. So we may get down to, if I said miles, I meant feet, 121 feet by 121 feet, and that the pixels then might not be able to see the tiniest details, but we should know what's in that crater.
Wow. If we were to find life, Linda, depending on the nature of it, do you think that would be knowing what you know about our government? And I'm sure we want to think that everybody in NASA and everybody in the government would tell us nothing but the straight truth. But if they found life, Linda, would they tell us right away?
They found life before World War II, as far as I know. Back in 1941, they knew they were dealing with extraterrestrial biological entities or alien presence here then.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's fair. Well, but I meant contemporary new photographs. If they came up with something, really, evidence of life, photographic evidence of life, would they release that?
I have felt for some time that around this period, 2015, 2016, that there is going to be, they're looking, I think, they want we'll call it a politically convenient and safe way to introduce the planet to other life. And what easier and convenient way would it be to say we've got marine life in the ocean of Enceladus, or we have microbes on Mars, or we have discovered something on Ceres, or whatever it is, as long as the 3-inch headline is other life, we've confirmed it in this universe. It's in our own solar system, but it's far enough away psychologically that it's not a threat. It's fascinating. It moves the whole dialogue. It gives permission to every human being on the planet to report strange things. And once that permission is there, I think some of the horrible pressure that all of us feel that we're living at a time when governments are sliding more and more down that slippery slope of wanting to control everything we do, think, and be, and that this could be a psychological release in some way for the whole planet, because we are then going to be not alone in the universe. We will not be isolated, quote unquote, on Earth. And that I think the Pope has said this. This would make the divine field larger. The fact that there are other intelligences, and there may be some in the Michio-Kaku 3 or 4 category of really advanced intelligence, that enhances the whole idea of what is the pura vida that is behind all life.
That I don't think they would. I don't think they'd announce that. If they found some small crawling thing or evidence of life on one of these moons, that I think they could release safely. If they encountered a Type 2, Type 3 civilization, I'm not so sure.
Well, I think that's the kind of civilization that has been dealing with this planet and other planets.
Yes, yes.
That is why I personally do not think that it has demonstrated that it wants to annihilate us. I think that, in fact, I think humanity has value, and that we may be being manipulated and used, but it may be in the long run for all benefit, theirs and ours, and that we just have to get past this provincial thinking that we have been manipulated by concocted policies of denial for so long. We have to get past that. If we know that there's other life in the universe, that somehow this would cause the world to panic. I don't think the world would panic if they were told we're not alone in the universe, there are other life forms, and now we have a lot more to explore, learn, and maybe develop trade. That would really appeal to ranchers that I've talked to who are now finally, Art, they've come so far in the animal mutilation mystery from when I began in 1979 that I had a rancher in Montana who has lost a dozen really expensive Angus just in the last 12, 14 months. And he told me on the last one, which was in January of this year, he says, Linda, I'm beginning to think that we are dealing with something from outer space, because they've dealt with beams, they've dealt with all kinds of stuff.
Well, maybe we could export beef.
Well, he said, look, if they want my animals, then just give me something I can trade on Earth, and we'll set a deal.
Hear, hear.
And it was so refreshing, because he's been living with the phenomena, and he's not scared, and he would like to get something practical out of it for humans living on this planet. Wouldn't it be great if we could get to that point where we here on the Earth would stop violence, because it's crazy to kill each other, and that we could have trade routes, and who knows what horizons if we actually could have some kind of trade agreements that was not confined to black underbelly governments, but was our whole planet involved with the solar system and beyond.
That would be wonderful. But if it involves stopping violence on Earth, well, that's going to be quite a do.
If they made us, they must know how violent we are, and that we have to get past it.
Well, do you think they made us in their image? And if so, then I don't know. We better think pretty hard before getting into too many trade agreements.
Well, the evolutionary truth about why the standing up primates emerged the way they did 2 million years ago and kept evolving in different types, and why was Neanderthal replaced by Homo sapiens sapien when Neanderthal never had a clue it was being replaced by Homo sapiens sapien. What is it that Homo sapiens sapien brought to the extraterrestrial table that Neanderthal did not, when we are learning that Neanderthal had a bigger capacity a skull for a brain, that they buried their dead, that they put flowers on graves, and now there is even a kind of reanalysis on some of the beautiful cave paintings, not some of the grander ones, but a lot of the cave paintings on the France, Spain, that area border, they have always been ascribed to evolving Homo sapiens sapien. And now there's a whole new set of data that suggests that some of it was Neanderthal. That meant that they were creative, that they were painting and communicating in caves, and as I said, spiritual.
Right.
So why were they phased out in Homo sapiens sapien?
I don't know, but brains don't size of brain doesn't necessarily equate to intellect or, I don't know, the ability to speak, the ability to communicate. We brought a lot, of course, and look what we have now. Better tools, better this, better that, Windows, got it all. I'm sort of joking with you, but I mean, Linda, even though our brains may not be as big as theirs were, that's not an automatic indicator of actual intellect, is it?
Well, it goes to the heart of agenda, and that's what I meant. If we knew the truth about why there have been these evolutionary models, let's call it that, from Homo erectus up through Denisovans and a whole bunch, up through to Neanderthal, and then here comes Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens sapien in the current form about 35,000, 40,000 years ago. If we knew what the truth was about the genetic manipulation of DNA in already evolving primates on this planet, which was in that paper I saw at Kirtland, and assuming that that is true, then we might have great insights about the whole terraforming and alien presence that has been on this planet for a very long time, in which it appears that there is something about Earth itself, the DNA here, something about the metals that are needed. And that is a question. Need goes to the question of agendas. And that's the part that we're missing the most.
Right. Okay, well, I think in the next hour, and we're coming toward a break, we'll move on. But boy, this has been absolutely fascinating stuff. You never fail us, Linda. Never, never, never. I, too, by the way, have had some things happen to me that I cannot, and in some cases will not discuss, things that probably I should discuss, but I can't bring myself to do it. You and I need to get together sometime in the southwest part of the United States. We get a lot of booms. And when I say booms, I mean really big booms. We've had high weirdness here in the desert. I have a very good friend across town. I think I've told this story. And he built a porch. And when he built the porch, he sunk some big hunks of wood into the ground. The noise at night, the vibration, was so bad that he had to tear down that porch. Are you listening, Jerry? It kept him awake at night. He couldn't sleep. And then there are the booms. We've got the Air Force out here practicing dropping bombs. They cause big booms. And then we have these unexplainable, inexplicable booms that just occur and the whole house feels like it moves, but nothing like what's going on in Rhode Island. And I think Linda has more on that. Hi, Linda.
Yes, I do. And it is a very fascinating event in this whole kind of series of them. You go back to 2011, that's when my first Earth Files report started, where I was getting a lot of emails from people saying there was this huge loud boom. It shook our walls, it shook the floor, the dogs started barking, the cats ran away, we ran out the door, we were expecting to see an explosion, we were expecting, and some people think cars are crashing outside. One man said it felt like a truck had impacted in the side of my house, and they run outside. It's still. They don't hear anything. They don't see an explosion. Their neighbors are not coming out onto the street. That has been one of the most peculiar characteristics from the beginning in 2011 on to this day, is that people have said, I don't understand how there could have been that much force in my house, and my neighbors didn't feel or hear anything.
Right.
And I had been reporting about a lot of this, and it was in the spring of 2013. It was May of 2013. And I got first an email communication and then a phone call from a man who introduced himself, said I could not use his real name or where he actually lived, but that he was saying that he was calling and making contact with me on behalf of a whistleblower geophysicist who was working at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. And he said that the radio, he had listened and heard me on various radio programs and had seen Earth files about all of these booms, and that's why the geophysicist was reaching out to me. And he said, the intermediary, that they were talking about it, and the geophysicist surprised him when he said that the mysterious booms that were being heard not only in North America but many parts of the world, and that he expected them to become more frequent and intense around the world because, this is a quote from the whistleblower, something was going on in the inner core of the Earth. They don't know if it's a magnetic pole change that involves restructuring of minerals within the soil down to the mantle and core. They don't know if it's a regular occurrence that happens in cycles on the Earth, or if it is a short-term, one-time boom phenomenon, or something very serious. They really have no idea what's going on.
Do they have any clues on how it could affect one house and without every neighbor in the neighborhood coming out going, what the hell?
Yeah, we got into that. That the geophysicists used the analogy of the Earth's crust acting sort of like a large speaker diaphragm, and that you can project sound in the infrasound range. We know that the core of this planet, 4,000 miles down below our feet, this big two-thirds, Art, it's two-thirds the size of the diameter of our moon, is this iron crystal sphere, solid, right at the center of our planet. And it's inside of a liquid iron core. They're almost completely iron with a little nickel. But the big sphere at the center of this Earth is made out, they think the pressure, it's of a very specific hexagonal structure at the atomic level that makes it completely different from the iron liquid of the outer core. This is critical because all of the questions that we're talking about and whether we're going to go into a magnetic pole flip relate to this big solid hexagonal matrix iron sphere, and it is turning one direction. The Earth and the outer core is turning the opposite direction.
Can I stop you just 1 second? I really, this is so fascinating. I didn't know that we knew what was down there. How do they know that, Linda?
Well, it has been only in not very long. It's only been in the last probably 20, 30 years where they have been getting more and more refinements about this Earth solid sort of iron nickel inner core. They've got mileage on it now. I'm looking at the figures, 1,520 miles in diameter.
Wow.
And yeah, this is the inner core, the sphere. And its surface temperature, get this, inside of our Earth, this iron matrix, this like a crystal sphere, the surface temperature is as hot as the surface of our sun.
My God.
10,800 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 6,000 degrees Celsius. And the fact that this inner core, with a surface temperature like the sun, 70% the diameter of our moon, the mass of this inner core of our Earth is a number that goes on like 100 million tons, and that is about 30% greater than the mass of the moon. And that we have learned since 2005, so if this is 15, so 10 years ago, it was the Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and they found out, they're the ones, that the core spins faster than the Earth. That's what I was talking about. The core is going one direction, and the outer core, the liquid iron, goes up to the mantle, goes up to the crust. And the crust that we live on, we humans, animals, trees, everything,
yes,
it varies from 5 to about 25 miles. When you realize we are living on the rind of an orange, the skin of an apple, to this gigantic planet that is such a dynamo literally at the center.
Well, okay, that's exactly what I was going to say. What you described sounds like a dynamo, Linda. Does that mean that that's a possible source of gravity?
Well, mass, any large mass,
has gravity.
Or gravitational, all matter to some degree has mass, and mass, that's where Einstein used that analogy of the foam rubber mattress, and you would place the different size and densities of objects on it, and it would show that a lighter ball would only go down so far in the foam, and then a big, heavy bowling ball would sink way down. Well, that's a metaphor for the distribution of various masses, and it becomes confusing because, let's say we look at Pluto, and we might say, well, what did Pluto weigh or something? But scientists are always interested in the mass, and the mass relates to the density of that matter, and that's where I was saying when they did these measurements, they now know Pluto is probably 55% ice and 45% rock, something like that, and that Charon is even lighter. So depending upon the density of the matter, you're going to have different masses, and the different masses have different gravitational pulls on each other. But that is separate, completely separate.
Yeah, but the counter rotation that you're talking about would produce all kinds of electromagnetic.
It's what produces our magnetic fields. And the more I study, the more you realize our planet is protected from the solar winds, from gamma rays, from so many things, because we have such a powerful dynamo in the center, and we have all these magnetic fields that are deflecting. And here is where we get to the question, could all of the booms, the trumpets, the metallic scraping sounds, the sinkholes, the bizarre things that have been going on for the last 4 years, could they be related to changes that are, we'll say, initiated because of changes in the Earth's solid core that is spinning? To use the term spinning, don't think it's going fast. They're just rotating. But that the infrasound from what could be happening in changes in the Earth core goes up through the mantle. The mantle is not liquid. The mantle is like a lot of very, very hot rock. But when it gets up to the rind that we live on up in there, when magma is under pressure, and then let's say there's a weak spot in the Earth, and it bursts out, it automatically changes its form into what we call the liquid lava, because it is no longer under the pressure that it is in the mantle that keeps it into the rocky form, and it comes out as lava. Well, in this current dialogue about what these booms could be, could it be related to a magnetic pole flip and all of that? I did a a lot of research, and I looked at videos that had been done by Gary Glatzmeyer. He's a geophysicist in California. He is the man about in the mid-'90s, mid to late '90s. He got agreement from the Department of Energy and various government agencies to use Cray computers to feed in a lot of geophysical data, and he wanted to know, could they run a program that would be like a computer model simulating conditions? Would they see a pole flip, a magnetic pole flip that the computers would generate as time? In other words, if it went on for 5 days, it might be like 5 million years. So they had a compression in time, but it was relating to the dynamics of what happens between pole flips. And he got them. He got pole flips that were being generated, we'll say, spontaneously out of data that related to what they knew about the Earth. Now, here is where it becomes both sobering and fascinating. When, in the last one, the last pole flip was 786,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. They can study ash and the sediments in lakes, and there is a lake in Italy that has been very good in studying that last pole flip, and they have gotten down to the point where they can say that the magnetic field of this planet went way down, then it might come up a little, it would go way down again, and it would bounce up and down. They had 6 very specific up, down, up, down, up, down.
Right.
In the last change, the pole, it was then the North Pole was in the Antarctic and the South Pole was up in the Arctic.
Right.
Within 100 years of that last up and down, and the downs are very dangerous to some Earth life, the down, it changed. So they were shocked to find out that it could have gone from the up and down yo-yoing to a magnetic field change in a century. Now, that means, and that was the headlines in the newspapers, that the pole could flip in a human lifetime. Now,
isn't our current magnetic field weakening significantly right now?
That's exactly. You took the thought right out from my head.
Sorry.
That's all right. This is good. The first 6 months of 2014, the swarm satellites that were put up by ESA only about 3 years ago, they sent back data that showed between January through June of 2014 was the most rapid, I think, ever seen in a decline in the magnetic field over the Western Hemisphere. Simultaneously, there was a big strengthening in the Indian Ocean. When you look at Gary Glatzmeyer's animation that had been developed from his running the computers trying to understand what happens during a magnetic pole flip, you see that these blobs of very rapid relative to a norm, a decline in a magnetic field in one part of the Earth and a strengthening in the other is what they find are the conditions leading up to a magnetic pole flip. But this is maybe the one that gives you real pause. It could be, based on computer modeling, that for 1,000 years, maybe even 2,000 years, on either side of the flip, that the magnetic field strength of the Earth may be way down from what it is now and stay down because of, from the Earth's point of view, it is a natural thing. It has happened hundreds of times. But before 786,000 years ago, it had happened almost every 200 to 400,000 years on a kind of average for a while. There were other, way back, there were big periods where there wasn't a magnetic pole flip, and nobody fully understands what is it that causes a rebellion. It's referred to that by some people, a rebellion at the atomic level of that crystal iron sphere and the liquid, where it's at the atomic level that the negative and positive begin changing.
So in other words, we're way overdue, Linda. I'm also overdue for a break, so I have to do it. Stay right there for a moment. Way overdue for a pole flip. And the next question would be...
Dark. Call Midnight in the Desert at 1-952-CALL-ART. That's 1-952-225-5278.
Linda Moulton Howe is here, and this is kind of a critical juncture, isn't it? We're way overdue for a pole flip, and I wonder, when the craze went to work on the problem, what they thought about what would happen if it begins, or if it occurs quickly, or, no, Linda, there were not people to be flipped last time round. So did he look into that? What would happen to us, to life, or would it just be a non-event?
They know that there will be an increase in the number of skin cancers, because when the magnetic field begins to weaken, and if it stays down, it means a whole lot more solar energy gets to the surface of the Earth. It also means that gamma rays can get down to the surface of the Earth. One calculation is that there might be something like 250,000 new skin cancers each year during the period of time that there would be this weakening of the magnetic field. And then you have the question that nobody yet knows, seriously. What would happen to the marine animals and the birds that are so dependent upon magnetic fields?
Sure.
I have talked to one professor about it who said, there will be birds. There's no question. There will be birds, and they won't be able to function, and they may not be able to survive. But there are other birds that depend on magnetic fields, but they come more equipped. They're more flexible. They're more spontaneous in their ability to change with magnetic field changes. And he said that is sort of the way that most scientists look. They've tried to find, is there any kind of a rhythm, a coincidence between where there have been magnetic pole flips and, let's say, extinction events? And they cannot find such a match. And that Earth Files, I have shown, when you look at the black and the white, meaning a white or the black can be assigned to the way it is today and the way when it flips, and you look at black, white, black, white, black, white going 200,000 years, 400,000 years, whatever it is, and you realize this has happened so many times, and the Earth has kept evolving. It isn't like an extinction event of an asteroid or a comet hitting, but when the magnetic field would go down so low, and if, I'm not saying that anybody knows for sure, all of the marine strandings and the weird things that have been happening off and on, are they exactly to the heart of your question before the break? What happens in the century in which we are all living if this is the century for the magnetic poles to finally flip after 786,000 years? Will it be disoriented marine animals, birds that fall out of the skies in flocks, as have been happening since 2011 some places? Would the booms, the metallic sounds, the trumpets, well, in some of the hypotheses about what happens in the core, the idea is that infrasound can come up through the mantle, come up to the crust, go up to the ionosphere, charged particles all the way around this planet. Then the infrasound can be deflected back to the ground, and here we get to the question, how could one house on a neighborhood be shaken so badly and people hear a boom and nobody else? Well, this is not proved, but I've talked with people who are in geophysics, and they say it's not impossible that the bounce back from the ionosphere could focus down on a house, and that infrasound would become audible, and it would explain, Art, why dogs have gone crazy in houses in so many places before the humans have heard anything, and that is the nature of infrasound. The animals react first. So there are these characteristics in the boom phenomena that begin to raise in my own mind. That's why I've done at Contact in the Desert, for example, I did a whole program on this whole issue of the booms and the metallic scrapings and the trumpet sounds in the context of, could this be explained by coming up to a magnetic pole shift?
Linda, is it true that there was a woman actually thrown 10 feet in the air?
This is an amazing story, and I just want to finish one more thought.
Sure.
That pinpoint to a house is part of this phenomena, but it has been reported simultaneous within the same minute over 5 counties in Georgia. That was about 3 years ago. There was a police officer coming home for lunch. He heard the horrible boom that covered 5 counties, and his garage door was bounced out of its track. That's a lot of energy, right?
It is, yes.
This in Saturday, November 29th, 2014, less than a year ago. There were booms heard in the Buffalo, New York region on the U.S. side and across the entire Atlantic into the U.K., between southern England up to Edinburgh, Scotland. People were reporting huge, gigantic booms. The headlines in England were explosions and loud bangs. Art, it was all in the same time period. On a clock, it would be 7 hours or 8 hours apart, right? I mean, the clocks would be, because England is in one time zone, but the booms were happening at the same time in 2 sides of the Atlantic. That's the biggest.
That's incredible. All right, Lynn, hold tight. We're at break. I've got to go. So we'll be right back. And we may be lucky. God or somebody may be timing this just right, because if we do get a pole flip, I'm a ham operator, and I know the sun is about to go into a period, perhaps.
For Dark Matter News, I'm Leo Ashcraft. A French teenager infected at birth with HIV has shown the ability to control levels of the infection in her body without being on antiviral treatment. The finding provides new hope that a functional cure for HIV, where the virus is brought down to low levels but not eradicated in the body, may one day be possible. The 18-year-old female whose mother was HIV positive was given antiviral treatment soon after birth, but stopped at age 6 and has since maintained undetectable levels of the virus in her blood, known as remission, for 12 years. This is the first time long-term remission has been shown in children or adolescents. The researchers believe there may be something unique in her biology that, combined with early treatment, enabled her to control the infection. But for now, the reasons remain a mystery. 4 years after the disaster at Japan's Fukushima nuclear power plant, strange things are happening to the plants and animals there. Recent years have brought reports of deformed fruit and mutant butterflies. But the latest is a remarkable photo of a deformed daisies posted on Twitter. The photo was taken in a city which lies about 70 miles from Fukushima. A tweet describes how the daisies growing there have apparently been impacted by exposure to radiation since the March 2011 incident, which resulted in the meltdown of 3 of Fukushima's 6 reactors, following a devastating tsunami. While one of the daisies grew up normally, one of them split into 2 stems to have 2 flowers connected to each other, another having 4 stems of flower tied like a belt. The one with 4 stems grew up to be tied to each other, and it had the ring-shaped flower. The atmospheric dose is 0.5 microsieverts at 1 meter above the ground. This radiation dose is classified as safe for medium to long-term habitation. That no doubt played a part in the Japanese government's recent decision to allow more than 7,000 residents of a town near the Fukushima plant to return home 4 years after being evacuated. This is Dark Matter News. Video of a handgun fired from a hovering drone into a wooded area has been posted on YouTube, where it has gone viral. Apparently by an 18-year-old Connecticut student whose father says his son created the drone for a college class. No one was harmed, nor has the teenager been arrested or charged. Still, the video has stirred fresh debate about the use of and dangers posed by drones. The U.S. Geological Survey says the fault that produced a 4.0 magnitude earthquake in Fremont early Tuesday morning is expected to produce another major earthquake any day now, and the Bay Area residents should be prepared. The 2:41 a.m. earthquake on the border of Fremont and Union City occurred at the Hayward Fault at a depth of 5 miles. The quake caused some BART delays early Tuesday, but appears to have caused no major damage. At least 13 smaller quakes or aftershocks have been reported near the same location as of 6:42 a.m., the largest of which was a 2.7 magnitude at 2:56 a.m. While damage from the quake was minimal, scientists warn that a much larger one is expected on the Hayward Fault, which extends from San Pablo Bay in the north to Fremont in the south and passes through the heavily populated areas including Berkeley, Oakland, Hayward, and Fremont. The last big earthquake on the fault, estimated to have a 6.8 magnitude, occurred in 1868. It killed about 30 people and caused extensive damage in the Bay Area, particularly in the city of Hayward, from which the fault derives its name. A research geophysicist with the United States Geological Survey says the population is now 100 times bigger in the East Bay, so we have many more people that may be impacted. The past 5 major earthquakes on the fault have been about 140 years apart, and now we're just at 147 years from the 1868 earthquake. The United States Geological Survey is urging residents to take steps to prepare for a major earthquake. I'm Leo Ashcraft for Dark Matter News.
That's Ross. Great stuff. Hi, everybody. I'm Art Bell. My guest is Linda Moulton Howe, and man, have we ever been learning some incredible things about the earth under our feet. The earth under our feet. And I've been puzzling for a long time about what's really down there. Linda just told us. Now, if all this is possibly leading to a flip, north is south, south is north, not knowing what it's going to do aside from the birds and other sea animals, bad enough, right? You see, when our magnetic field is weak, what happens on the sun really counts. So if there's a big flare, conceivably with no magnetic field or little magnetic field, it could literally singe us alive. Fortunately, the scientists now believe that sun activity may actually go down to virtually zero over the next many cycles, and those are, 11-year sun cycles. So who's watching out for us, Linda?
It's a very good question, because that would both impact perhaps a slightly cooler temperature on the Earth like it did long ago during the Younger Dryas in some areas. And it would, as you just said, if we had a quiet sun during a period of time of the magnetic pole flip, it might change those estimates on the number of skin cancers and other problems because it's energy that we can't absorb without it damaging us on the surface, depending upon intensity. So if the sun gets quiet, it would be this beautiful serendipity of things coming together in a confluence where the Earth is changing, the sun is changing, and they kind of are helping counterbalance this out. Now, you asked me before the break about that woman. It is the first known injury to a human in the context of one of these huge boom events.
What actually happened to her?
It was near 11:15 a.m. on a Sunday, or a Saturday, and it was on July 11th, not that long ago. The place was Salty Brine State Beach in Narragansett, Rhode Island. And I have an email, so I need to start the story actually before the boom and what happened to her, because this is one of the most fascinating developments to me. After the story and everything I'm going to tell you, I received this email from people who were there and experienced this, and this is going to shove the timeline back from what initially made the headlines of the woman going up in the air with the boom. The Providence Journal Online and WJAR NBC in Providence, Rhode Island, have reported that swimmers in the water felt the explosion in the water slightly before it happened on the beach and before the booms, and that the swimmers said they experienced it as an earthquake in their estimation, close quote, in the water. Then came the boom, and the woman, she was sitting in a beach chair. Her family was around her. They were the eyewitnesses to this. And she was catapulted by energy straight up. They estimated 10 feet. That is a lot to go from inertia, sitting in a chair, up 10 feet. And that's what the people around her said. She went straight up 10 feet. Then her body arced down onto the rock jetty. She had to go to the hospital. She had 2 cracked ribs. Her body was all bruised. She was kept until the end of the next day. Now, the witnesses there said that with this huge boom that everybody heard, it was as if the beach under her chair separated, and that there was one eyewitness that said that you could look down into the beach, and they compared it to like a crevice if there was an earthquake in the beach. Now, the water comes in. They were close to the water line. The water comes in and fills up this whole evidence. But it gets sort of stranger.
I don't know how.
Well, a bomb squad gets called to investigate this, what they were calling, quote, an explosion from under the sand, close quote. And there was not one single evidence of any kind of chemical explosive. They could not find anything except under the beach where her chair had been, they found an electric cable, and they brought in National Grid, that's the Rhode Island Power Company, and they dug into this spot under the chair, and they found a power cable. But they didn't even know if the power cable had any power in it. National Grid didn't know where it came from, why it should be down in the beach. They ended up taking the cable, I guess. They disconnected. People said that they took it away, or they cut it or did something. And that they used dogs and they used chemical swipes to look for explosive chemicals. Mm-hmm. They were looking for something that could explain the pressure of an explosion that was coming, they assumed, from underneath the beach, propelling her up in the air. Now, the story, about a week after this, a headline that I have from those local papers was that, if I can just get to it.
All right, Linda, I would like to ask you a quick question. That is, how close were the witnesses? You said there were witnesses. How close were they to this woman?
The family, they were just sitting right next to her. And it's just like that we were talking about, how could it be so pinpointed to one house? How could this be pinpointed to one woman sitting in one chair, surrounded by her family? She's the only one that is catapulted. And the headlines after this event and after the investigations and after she got out of the hospital and was home were officials. Cause of, quote, explosion at beach unknown. And they went to some academic people, and now they are speculating that possibly it was a compression wave from above. Now, the physics of that, I don't understand, but they gave up trying to explain coming from below the beach, even though it opened up, And even though she was catapulted upward, they have gone so far as to think, could it have been something from the atmosphere? Well, now we're back into the realm where we started. Could there be energy that is coming from a changing core in infrasound that goes up to the ionosphere and gets bounced back, sometimes in a pinpoint and sometimes across the Atlantic, or another one this year it was in November, is where it went from North Carolina. It was the spring, North Carolina all the way to New Jersey, simultaneous booms being reported. And so now you have that. Let's jump back to the whistleblower in May of 2013.
All right, I'm not sure about that, but it seems to me it takes us back to Pluto. You're talking about energy that... I'm sorry, energy that can't be explained.
Well, the whistleblower, initially in that whistleblower that came to me through the intermediary from Hill Air Force Base, yes, about the fact that the booms were linked to what he's been studying at Hill Air Force Base, and he works for the Department of Defense. He said that from the late 1990s that they had become aware of anomalous, strange sounds coming from deep in the earth. That's why he was hired as a geophysicist to begin studying what are the sounds that they were picking up. Mm-hmm. And my understanding was they were picking them up in military context. And that he said through the intermediary to me that their greatest concern in 2013 was that they are worried that if these core changes could be leading up to a magnetic pole shift and causing seismic swarms, which appears to be part of this, and there have been seismic swarms all over in so many different places, but not always tied to the booms, which has been extremely contradictory and confusing. Yes. But he said the top of their concern list, Juan de Fuca and Yellowstone Park.
Oh, God.
And what have we heard about in the New Yorker came out with a brilliantly written and detailed article about if Juan de Fuca, it's a plate, like we've got continental plates. Well, Juan de Fuca is another small, it's a small plate, but it's off of the Vancouver area and stretches Washington, Oregon, that area. It has been of concern for a long time because Juan de Fuca is going under the North American plate. And whenever you have plates, a large one going over a small one, right, the possibility of a tremendous energy release is definitely in the cards. That's what the New Yorker article was about. And if it, we'll just say, cracks, breaks, and releases up to a 9.1 to a 9.3 as potential, the estimate was that the population from the Canadian Vancouver, U.S. Vancouver, down the western coast of Washington, Oregon, and into Northern California could be millions of people lost. Okay, so this is Juan de Fuca. Think of a triangle now in your mind's eye. So that's Vancouver. Now come to the east to Yellowstone.
Right.
And the crater there, the last time it blew up, the animation that you can see today about that crater, if it blew up now with the intensity that it did about 600, 700,000 years ago, it would take out 6 states.
Six states.
Okay, so now you got Juan de Fuca, you have Yellowstone, come down to the Hayward Fault. There was a headline in the San Francisco Chronicle, those papers today, that USGS is worried that the Hayward Fault to the east of San Francisco and coming down, that it is overdue. And it parallels what? The San Andreas.
Right.
And the San Andreas is part of that big fault line that goes all the way down California. So now you've got USGS saying that if the Hayward fault goes, it could be up there. And that in 1700, it released huge amounts of energy on the Hayward fault when it was not a populated state. Today there was 41 million people in California.
That's right.
And so many live along the coast. And if San Andreas, Hayward, Juan de Fuca, or Yellowstone should be agitated by what is going on in the core of the Earth, translating out infrasound, causing more seismic and volcanic activity as it's getting ready to go into a magnetic pole flip, that's a hypothesis, then we are in a time when the Earth itself, Art, more than the Middle East, more than anything else, that the changes on this Earth geophysically could end up being the pivot point for all of humanity, from rising water to increased seismic activity to perhaps one of these fault lines going like it did in Fukushima in Japan, only here along the west coast of the United States or inland.
What a horrible thought.
Well, we're on a dynamic planet, and you look back out into the solar system, and we were talking about Pluto, and it has topography that nobody expected, and it has those 2-mile high mountains, and everybody says, how is this possible? How could we think of mountains as being made by plate tectonics on the Earth, where there are plates and pressures that are pushing things together, like the Indian plate that created the Himalayas by continents crashing? Well, on Pluto, to everybody's at least best estimate, there is no plate tectonics, and yet there's something going on even on that planet that has created those big mountains, and the whole fact that there are no craters. And one other interesting thing, we have weather to contend with on Earth, and it is increasing in intensity as the air gets warmer, because warm air can hold more water. That's just a physical fact. So as air gets warmer and holds more water, it has to come down in some places in torrential rains, like it has been in Albuquerque this year. We've broken all records. We've had just torrential rains, and we're supposed to be a desert, while desert places can become even more drought-stricken.
We're in big trouble out here.
Yeah, the drought where you are is terrifically intensive. So we have this dynamic planet, and that it is in the dynamic nature of Earth. It has been like this for 4.6 billion years, evolving, changing, and that it is perhaps there is something about a planet like Earth that all of the dynamic of it, from the core to the surface, and these constant changes with the sun, are what make it such a perfect petri dish for developing and evolving life that you couldn't do, let's say, even on fascinating Pluto.
So do you think everything that's going on right now, which is a lot, is pointing toward what we just talked about? In other words, I guess I'm asking, are we sort of in the run-up to... I hate to use the word Armageddon, but for those who would be affected by what you described, that's what it would amount to. Well,
the one thing that I think has been healthy in the appearance of this article in the New Yorker, the straightforward discussion by USGS, is that when we're told the truth, I think it prepares us psychologically, and we know that we keep living our lives. But if you have a lot more information, and if the government can be trusted to tell us the truth and give advanced warnings, then it's possible that whatever is going to happen, that the government of the United States might help people get out of their areas. This is not a perfect solution at all, but what I mean is if we get into more dialogue about the realities of factual data, knowing that still seismic events are so hard to predict, but they know that there have been these unusual seismic swarms. There were thousands, literally thousands of 1 to approximately 3 magnitude earthquakes swarming in the upper northwestern corner of Nevada and flopping over into Cedarville. And that was interesting. The people in Cedarville have been really feeling booms. They've heard booms. They felt the ground shake. And they are getting the resonance from the swarms in Nevada.
All right. Hold it right. We've got to cover. For example, Linda, I guess you know I'm a real cat person, Linda.
Me too.
You've been in my house, you know.
Yeah, and me too. I love cats.
So this next story is hard, but I guess we have to do it because it's absolutely inexplicable what's going on. And so if you would please, what is going on?
Well, I'll take you briefly back to 1978 and a report in the New York Times to set the stage for 2015. New York Times. In 1978, in St. Catharines near Toronto, Canada, authorities were frustrated by more than 100 missing cats and dogs, and many others found in their owners' yards, cut in half, skinned, decapitated, disemboweled, or paws removed without any blood at the site.
No blood.
No blood ever. 10 years later, on August 13th, 1989, 67 cats found mutilated in Tustin, California, a suburb of Los Angeles near Santa Ana. The New York Times wrote, quote, "Some of the cats were cut in half with what some say is almost surgical precision, others disemboweled or skinned. One resident said, 'There is never any blood at the scene. The animals are often dismembered with surgical precision, and paws and other body parts are often left on the ground in strikingly similar arrangements. No one ever seems to hear anything, nor do dogs bark during the killing. It was believed the cats are captured, taken elsewhere, their blood drained, and organs removed, and then replaced on their owners' lawns," close quote, New York Times. But I can add that throughout the decades, I started investigating half-cat mutilations at least 20 years ago. And the thing that has struck me and some veterinarians who have investigated it out of their own curiosity is that often, for reasons unknown, if, let's say it's neighbor A, let their cat out at night for, maybe they were used to doing it just for an hour. Some people leave them out at night. And they would find the front half or the back half in neighbor B's or neighbor C's yard, front or back, not on the owner's yard. And that has happened quite often, confusing everybody, because it is the person who had the cat who went looking for their cat, and then they find the front or the back half on a neighbor. And, of course, then the neighbors are, we did not do this.
Of course not.
And there's no question. Now, I would say, I think it's in Earth Files alone, which is my news website, I have done about 67 or 70 half-cat reports just in the last 15 years. And there, where people have sent me, and most people don't do this, but what I'm saying is there are enough of this going on that I've been able to do that many reports, because people will reach out to send the photo saying to me, as a science and environment reporter, how is it possible to cut this cat in half and not have any blood anywhere? There's no fluid, there's nothing on the ground, and they are like a hand puppet, as one man said, that the front half is there and nothing is inside it but the fur and the head on the outside. Now, many investigators, in looking at this, they have concluded that they don't either understand what the cutting instrument is and that it's doing cautery, or the animals are being taken, they're being cut in half, and it's being done cleanly, and then for reasons unknown, the animals are returned. Now, what does this sound like? To me, the first time that I got into half-cat mutilations, I felt like I was exactly in the cattle, horse, pig, goat, sheep, the large animal mutilations.
Of course, yes.
Because it's the same thing, bloodless, they are returned. Why are the large animals ever found right back in the pasture? If they are being taken in beams by non-human intelligences, there is no reason to ever return any of the bodies. It means then that there is something about the mutilation phenomena that might have a lot of agendas attached to it, but one of its residues with humans is intimidation, anger, and fear. Those are the three emotions that go to the people who experience this. And this is what has disturbed me the most. The cat is a beloved pet to most humans, as dogs are. When something that falls into the category of another intelligence that can interact with our planet and basically do what it wants to do, but is not demonstrating, I don't think, any wholesale intent to destroy humans, but chooses to go to the animal world and then moves from the large animals to domestic animals that we love. What is that signal? What are they trying to do? And that is the part that bothers me the most about the half-cats. I think it's in the same category as the large animal deaths. But what does it mean? Do you have any gut perspective reaction?
Well, all of what you described, of course. But, Linda, I had a cat that was sick, and it spent a very great deal of time at the vet. And the vet told me at one point that cats, this is an exact quote, this was a really great vet, said cats have a physiological setup that is unlike any mammal on the face of the earth, so much different that they might as well be from another planet. That's an exact quote. So I don't know why whoever it is would be interested in cats, but it's got me wondering if one of these days soon we're going to be finding half people.
Well, it hasn't happened to my knowledge yet. And the thing about it is that the more deeply I have gotten into the whole human abduction syndrome, you realize that we're dealing with intelligence that works in math, works in symbols, works in metaphors, works in holograms. It is not the way we relate. It reminds me very much of one particular abductee who said, they rammed instruments up my vagina, they stuck a needle in my stomach, they violated me, I screamed, I called them cuss words, I'm screaming. And then they let me go, and I'm being escorted by a tall being down a hall.
Yes.
And a whole bunch of beings are on the floor, on their knees, as if they are bowing to me as I walk by in my fury. of feeling raped. And she said, I suddenly realized they're trying to say we're sorry. And that the metaphor was like a theatrical drama. This kind of thing comes up in the abduction syndrome as if we're dealing, our mind is alien, their mind is alien, how do alien minds communicate? That some of this is still so enigmatic to the people in the human abductions. But there is a very brief excerpt from a book that I personally think was factual, disguised as a novel, and probably done by the government as a test in 1980. It was called The Cattle Mutilators, and the name of the author was John A. Dalton. And I called up then Manor Books around 1980, somewhere in 1988, I believe, trying to track this man down. And the conversation boiled down to, it was just a randomly picked out manuscript that we decided to publish. We don't have any records on John Dalton. And I remember saying, you published a book without ever communicating with the author? And they said yes, which I didn't believe, right? So, and they went out of business. They just literally disappeared. Here is one excerpt in a story in which it is a doctor who is trying to get to the bottom of human abductions and human mutilations and animal mutilations. And I got this book in 1980 at the time that my film, A Strange Harvest, was first broadcast, because somebody knew me, knew my work, read this book, sent it to me, and said, Linda, this is fact masquerading as a novel. And when you get to the part where the doctor forces a confrontation with the intelligence on the other side, that they call themselves Mu, M-E-U-E, and they have long necks and are kind of gray, and it's sort of in that gray category. This is the dialogue telepathically between the doctor and one of these beings. You see, earthlings, or humans as you refer to yourselves, live only in the time and dimension that your limited knowledge affords you. You are so preoccupied with finding life in your own galaxy that you overlook the obvious. And he says, are you saying you are from here, from Earth? And this being says, everywhere in the universe or any void in between. We are from a different dimension, a different plane of existence. We have no boundaries or limits as you have. We are an anti-log of everything you see visually. We can travel in any dimension and occupy the same area as, say, Earth, but not the same time or space without being observed. The possibilities of existence are infinite. The doctor. In other words, we could both be in the same spot and neither of us would be aware of the other. That's correct. Now you are within our dimension. Since you have boarded, it's the craft. Since you have boarded, we've moved back into our dimension. Neither the lab nor yourself is any longer visible to humans, but we are still here, close quote. And this brought so many things into focus for me, because there has, throughout all of the human abduction syndrome, the dragonfly drone phenomena of 2007, the visibility, invisibility, the descriptions from World War II of craft that were not moving from point to point, they were popping in and out point to point.
Right.
The whole issue of intelligence being able to manipulate space-time, and that that dimensions are a fabric of the cosmos that we still are not familiar with beyond what happens at the moment of death, and the transfer of the soul to another dimensional frequency is a concept that humanity has tried to deal with. But if abductees are correct, how many times have I heard from people going over the last 36 years, Linda, I was shown, or I was told, or I felt that there are so many more dimensions that we know nothing about and we cannot go in, but the intelligences that are interacting with us on this planet, they do have needs. They move in dimensions. And that is the big box of humans not having any comprehension about the physics or the agendas or the intents of beings that can move dimensions and timelines as well as matter worlds. But I believe that the government of the United States, working with the UK and Australia and Canada, the allies of World War II, I think that when Ben Rich, in that university presentation that he made years ago before he died, that was so significant, and he said, we can take ET home. We have every technology that you could imagine, but none of it is out in the public where humanity lives on our own planet. That is the disconnect between the 1% and the 99%. That is the dark underbelly of trying, maybe starting out protecting humanity from shock to the system, to reaching a point where the so-called idea of us having some sort of a colony on Mars, and that it is there secretly, and it could very well be, and that the Earth, waiting for the generations to pass from the Earth, so that the new history, the concocted history, the idea that we have a colony on Mars that just happened to get there through human effort, that could be one of the designs and agendas when everything in me feels, and certainly that's the way the abductees and a lot of military people feel, for us to continue on this planet to live with 1% power brokers who are keeping these huge, huge truths about what we humans are, what other life there is in the universe from us, is the most damaging possible route. Because we humans, we need to grow up, we need to become stronger, and we surely should never get down on our knees to beings that show up.
Linda, I've got to take a quick break, but I want to just point something out. You mentioned abductees being shown a kind of a reverence by those who abduct them at the end, after violations, that kind of thing.
That was one metaphor for that one woman.
It made me think of the Native Americans, that when they kill an animal, I think they thank it and they thank the earth. Just something that occurred to me when you said that. Hold tight, Linda. We'll be right back. We've got to get to the phones, actually. I'm sure lots of people have questions for you. What a presentation. Linda Moulton Howe. All right. Those are the actual phone numbers, folks. And we've also, of course, got Skype. If you're in North America, you dial us up at MITD51. That's MITD51. Use a headset mic if you can, or your cell phone, whatever. If you're outside North America, we've got an overseas Skype just waiting for you at MITD55. That's MITD55. And Linda, I hope you're up for a few questions. Lots of people.
Yes, I would love to interact.
Okay, good. Let's, I guess, go to Florida. Hello there in Florida. You're on the air with Midnight and Linda.
Hello, Oi and Linda.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, I just wondered just what is going to happen when the government releases all the information out about aliens in space.
What is going to happen when they do?
Yeah, well, that's exactly when it's like it's going to happen.
Linda, are you getting this?
I'm not exactly sure, unless she's asking, do I think that there will be some sort of collapse? And I do not think that the world now would collapse from the truth. In fact, the Mormon religion, the Indian religion, East Indian, there are whole segments of the planet in which extraterrestrial life has been intimate to everything that they have studied and done. And so I think that there are huge populations that this will just come as, oh, we already know that.
Okay. Good enough. Let's try Denver, Colorado. Hello. Midnight, you're on the air.
Evening. Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, Linda, we miss you here in Denver. I know it's been a long time. But I wanted to ask you something specific that might tie into what you're studying and investigating, which is kind of like skinwalker. Have you ever made a connection between that and, like, cattle mutilations, etc.?
Oh, yes. The whole Skinwalker Ranch, it goes back to when Art and I were doing Dreamland and Coast.
Right. That's right.
And, in fact, I'm the reporter who first interviewed the man was Mr. Sherman. And he had gotten in touch with me through somebody about all of these events dealing with animal mutilations on his ranch in Utah. And I had done so much reporting, and with Art, had done a lot of animal mutilation reports, and that's why I got to talk with Mr. Sherman. And what I will never forget, doing this long phone interview with him, and he was talking about the red lights that would come up to the house. He was talking about the craft. He was talking about looking through binoculars and his hunting sights, scope on his rifle. He was talking about Sasquatch-type events and the mutilations, and said one night, in frustration and anger, he could see through his binoculars what looked like lights going around something that was perhaps round or a disc down in the pasture where he had lost animals. And he said he just, I don't know if he took his gun, I can't remember, but he tromped down to where he had been seeing this thing through the binoculars, and he got right under it and said it was not very far above the ground, and it was some sort of a craft, and the light coming through the windows was sort of a pale yellow, and inside, he, Sherman, looking up, could see what he thought looked like two humanoid men. And telepathically, what came into Sherman's mind was this: it would do no good to explain to him what we were doing. He would never understand. And it came telepathically into his mind. And it was in the context of one bizarre, disturbing animal deaths, the lights, his family upset, everything. And it was that insight that he said, we're dealing here with something that can do what it wants to do, but it's not going to explain to you or me what it's up to. And it was after I did and ran that interview with you, Art, that I believe it was Robert Bigelow then decided shortly thereafter that he would talk with Sherman and ended up buying the ranch.
That's right. That
became his science, sort of for science research. And then George Knapp worked with Colm Kelleher, on the book having to do with the skinwalker. And the skinwalker is the idea in the North American Indian where things can come, we're talking about dimensions, things can come in sort of from a different frequency. And that brilliant, dramatic open of what they thought was a big wolf coming right at them, and then the wolves would disappear, or the black cats in England, panthers in England, but they disappear. Are these the manifestations of something that's in another dimension, that when we extend our arm out in the air and we make circles, are we literally in some way actually moving XYZ in an area where there is another frequency where a whole bunch of other things are happening and we're all overlaid and connected?
All right, we've got to hold it right there. Caller, thank you, and Linda, thank you. We'll come back in just a very few moments. News coming up. I'm Art Bell, and you're...
For Dark Matter News, I'm Leo Ashcraft. A creationist group in the United States has raised $20 million to reconstruct a full-scale working model of Noah's Ark, the ship that saved Noah and all the world's animals from a flood in the Bible's book of Genesis. The Kentucky-based Christianity-defending group Answers in Genesis is now two-thirds of the way to reaching its fundraising target of $29.5 million. All thanks to donations from thousands across the world who want to see its Ark's Encounter project take sail. Answers in Genesis, a group that believes the world is around 6,000 years old, is basing the construction of the Ark on the dimensions provided in the Bible in Genesis 6, and in accordance with the sound established nautical engineering practices of that era. NASA has confirmed that the Earth will experience 15 days of total darkness between November 15th and November 29th, 2015. The event, according to NASA, hasn't occurred in over 1 million years. So says the website Newswatch 33. While the article seems legit, and the NASA official cited in the article, Charles Borden, does work for NASA, according to Snopes, the website Newswatch 33 is not a legitimate news outlet. Snopes says that Newswatch 33 hoaxed social media users a number of times since its inception, falsely claiming supporters raised $4 million for the defense of Charleston shooting suspect Dylan Roof, that a girl was electrocuted by her iPhone earbuds, that Jay-Z and Beyonce purchased the rights to the Confederate flag, and that the government had impregnated inexpensive cigars with listening devices. The moral of the story, be careful what you read while surfing the internet. This is Dark Matter News. A caller to a popular conspiracy talk radio show out of Ozark, Alabama, which is near the Rook Air Force Base, claims to have been tackled to the ground, arrested but not charged by several UN troops while attempting to take their picture at a local Walmart. The man claims that there were two men with badges wearing the United Nations logo, surrounded by 6 other men in dark suits who appeared to be their bodyguards. While attempting to film the men, 4 drew guns on the man, while 2 others took him to the ground. There have been numerous sightings of UN vehicles, such as armored trucks and medical vehicles, attempting to hide their logos, spotted all over the country in the last few years. Many surmise that the United Nations will play a big role in a martial law scenario here in the U.S. after the anticipated collapse of the economy. We have no way at the moment to verify this man's claims. However, the timing of the report, with the beginning of the Jade Helm exercise this month, it adds further to conspiracy worries. You might think with the vast reach of the Western world, there's no longer remains of any peoples unaware of the conveniences of modern society. We didn't look further than the Andaman Islands in the Bay of Bengal to disprove this notion, and they're one of the last uncontacted people on the earth. Estimates on their population vary greatly, in large part due to the hostility expressed by the islanders. Counts range from as low as 40 to as high as 500. Contact efforts have been made by Indian officials many times in the last century, and none of them have ended well. All recent observations of the island have been made from a great distance, and as such, getting an accurate head count remains difficult. The Sentinelese people are hunter-gatherers and are thought to have directly descended from the first human populations to emerge from Africa, and have probably lived in the Andaman Islands for up to 60,000 years. As hunter-gatherers, it goes without saying that this group doesn't have any agricultural capabilities. More interestingly, there's no evidence that the Sentinelese have controlled fire. They're about as primitive of a people as one might hope to find in 2015. But don't expect to visit this island paradise soon, as the inhabitants of this isolated remote island kill all visitors on sight. I'm Leo Ashcraft for Dark Matter News.
Call Art.
Or in North America, MITD 51 is the way to call us on Skype, MITD 51. Or if you're overseas, outside of North America, MITD 55, MITD 55. And Linda, we've got so many people, we're going to have to try and bring them on quickly and answer quickly if possible.
Okay.
On Skype, Stephen, your turn.
Yes, Linda and Art, it's been great show. A plethora of information on the universe and Earth. But Linda, running back to the beginning of the night, you were talking about the New Horizons mission and everything. What would it take with all this new information we're getting from Pluto for the IAS to reinstate Pluto, if possible? And would the definition of a planet have to be tweaked in order to do so?
Well, very good question. I know Change.org has had one of their submissions to the public, and that they got a great percentage who said, no, let's make Pluto back a planet. So there is definitely a social media effort to get Pluto reinstated. I know that the planetary scientists think that Pluto is definitely a planet. Well, the International Astronomical Union, they have sort of set their feet in the sand on this, because they said that if they, in terms of distance and size, that they had to make these distinctions, and that IAU is not known for being progressive. But I think that the whole issue of continuing to unfold all of this topography and this attention on Pluto, it has got to have an impact. And especially when you think that it has its own little solar system, that this is a planet, and maybe the IAU will eventually change its mind.
Okay. Overseas on Skype, you are on Midnight. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
How copy?
Just fine. Go ahead.
Okay, good. This is Charlie in Thailand.
Okay.
And I'm calling in just to say that the realized Buddhist masters for over 1,000 years have known, not guessed, but known 99% of what is being discussed on this show and other places. And secondly, the other comment I wanted to make is, I don't care if Pluto is a planet or not. It does not have its own solar system. It has its own moons. But who cares? Let's call it, an X if we want.
I guess.
Not the X planet. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. I guess a rock is a rock is a rock. But there are some people who are very emotional about this, and they want Pluto to have its planetary status back.
That's right.
All right, let's go to, I'm not really sure where we're going here, but on the phone. Hello.
Yeah, this is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, I'm calling from the Adirondack Mountains, and we're not too tech savvy up here, so I apologize.
You made it.
My question for Linda is real simple. I'm curious whether or not she can make any speculative connection between the melting of the polar ice caps and what appears to be a very gradual, in fact, the shift has been measured, the magnetic pole shift. It's moving about 1.5 miles a day towards Siberia. And NASA's estimates, they speculate that when it hits 40 degrees, there's going to be a much larger increase in seismic activity.
I did an Earth Files report with a geophysicist about that whole issue about probably 7 or 8 years ago, and that was when that Florida airport had to change the painting on its airstrips because of the change in the compasses and the magnetic fields there.
Right.
And the anomalies that happen in terms of magnetic field anomalies can happen in isolation, but it was that geophysicist who explained that what has been happening for, it's now coming up 55, 60 years, that there has been a progressive move of the magnetic pole north going from what was true north towards Siberia, and here's the reason. That there has been a big magma upwelling in Siberia over this whole period of time, and it is lots of iron, and magnetic fields would seek out and be attracted to the iron. That's why they think that there has been this progressive motion that has been increasing towards Siberia. That might or might not ever have any true relevance to what is going on inside of the core of the Earth that could set in motion the actual magnetic field change. They could be completely independent of each other. One, an isolated magma anomaly, the other going to that core that I was talking about.
All right. Quickly to St. George, Utah. Midnight, you're on the air.
Hi, Art.
Hi.
So, first, before I make my question, I'd like to mention that those booms that everybody's been hearing are absolutely real.
Oh, yes.
We hear them here. It shakes the entire house.
Where are you physically?
We are just outside of St. George, Utah, to the west of it, right near the border of Nevada.
Lots and lots of booms and seismic events there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and my question is, there's been a lot of news reports on like a humming noise in New Mexico, and I was wondering if that could be related at all to the booms.
It's a very good question. I myself have tried to get to the bottom of whether, remember going back into the 70s, and I think it was in Bristol, England, that was the very first public story about the strange hum, and UK scientists went out with recorders, and that was the first recording of the strange hum, and it had a certain hertz frequency, and then something very similar was recorded in Taos, New Mexico, where so many people were reporting. There has been the strange hum in the Detroit area that has been a real problem for a lot of people trying to get sleep the last few years. Does the hum precede the booms? And I think they do historically, but could they be linked to the same changes going on in the Earth's core? If that whistleblower was hired by the Department of Defense to work at Hill Air Force Base at the end of the 1990s, it was around 1998, because they were hearing very unusual sounds coming from deep in the Earth, that means that if that date is true, the government has been aware of these changes and these sounds for a long time before they started happening around the world in 2011. The hums go back to the 70s. So if the hums are connected, what is the disconnect on the timeline between why the hums would have come long ago and then booms, metallic scrapings, and these trumpets that we haven't really talked about? Several cases when the trumpets have been seen, they have been seen, two dramatic ones, Montana and Idaho. People in rural areas, and in both times, they were men, they saw a black triangular craft in the sky, completely unmoving, stationary. And they both had the impression that the trumpet sounds were emanating from that black triangle. Well, whose black triangle is that? And why would anything that was able to be stock still in the sky in a couple of cases, moving in other cases, why would it be broadcasting, if that's the word, trumpets?
Check your Bible. Nashville, Tennessee.
Assets here.
Yeah.
Nashville, Tennessee.
Hi, Art. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Art, Linda, this like deja vu. I talked to you guys almost 30 years ago when you were on Dreamland.
Right.
Anyway, I guess my main question is, Linda, you in your Alien Harvest, or excuse me, the documentary that you did,
A Strange Harvest.
You mentioned Strange Harvest, yes. you mentioned a woman that it was either taken underground or off-world, and she witnessed a pool or a vat of human parts.
Right.
You remember that?
Yes, it's in my book, An Alien Harvest. Brand new, expanded, updated edition is out. Came out about 6 months ago. And that was the Paul Benowitz investigation of a woman with her son. They were driving near Cimarron, New Mexico, and it was still late afternoon. It was not dark. And the mother and the son heard the bellowing of a cow in pain. And she pulled over to the side of the road, and she could see what she thought were two men, humans, which turned out to be not the case, but she thought at that moment that they were two men who had this cow down in the pasture the cow was screaming. And she and the son screamed at them to stop hurting the cow, and almost instantaneously a gigantic white light appeared over their car. And what happened, they both were taken. It's a long missing time case, and during the whole huge complex, I'm going to say they were taken to someplace underground, which she thought was on this planet down near Las Cruces. She was exposed to different types of beings, a very irritated, tall, pale being wearing a robe, as opposed to Greys, reptilians, and others that seem to be working for the tall, pale, white ones. And the tall one seemed to be very, very upset that she and her son were there, that a mistake had been made. And in the process of whatever they were trying to do or not do or hide or cover up, she ended up, maybe on her own, getting into a part of this underground installation where she said there was a humanoid floating in what appeared to be blood and organ parts. And the story that you've heard float around the web and all was that this being was getting sustenance in the blood from the animals. She never said that in the transcript. That was an inference. But she had the impression in the transcript that there was something in the liquid that the being was floating in that was being used like sustenance or medicine.
Either way, awful. William, you're on with Linda. Skype. Hello, William.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Go ahead, speak. Hello on Skype. Going once. Going twice. I guess they're frozen. Gone. Oak Harbor, Washington. You're on with Linda. It's midnight. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome back into my home, Art Bell.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Linda. You know, yes. I'm on the West Coast. I'm actually on one of the San Juan Islands off of Washington's coast. Right. Now, the news forecasters and everybody have been talking about the big one. And I've lived here since 1978, and the big one's always been discussed, but it seems like it's ramped up quite a bit. Michio Kaku was interviewed on CNN about this, and he said he would not live here if he had a young child.
Right, and I heard the interview, yes.
Yeah, and a couple days ago, one of my Facebook friends said they saw a FEMA vehicle on the island. And I'm kind of wondering, you have your ear to the ground, are you hearing anything more or different?
Yes, that there is concern because in 2008, there really was a very unusual series of earthquake swarms. And seismologists in a place like Yellowstone, they don't become alarmed with the swarms that are just indigenous to that Yellowstone unless, and this is what they always say, if we start getting a swarm and the magnitudes go from 1 to 3 up to 5, then there should be a national alert, like an alert, alarm.
Mm-hmm.
But out in that whole Juan de Fuca, it is related to this unusual seismic swarm that was studied in 2008. And then I know from personal interviews that I have done with geophysicists at Stanford and other places that there have been concentrated research into those swarms in the northwestern corner of Nevada, northeastern California, that have been going on now for a year or so, and that Cedarville has taken some of the brunt of that. And so we've got pockets of swarms that have been going on in places. The most unexpected, unprecedented was in Connecticut, and that was a few months ago on granite stone, and that there was no precedent for anything seismic happening there. This is the pattern. I think that there are patterns of seismic swarms, and when they start happening in an area where you have that Juan de Fuca plate that is going under the North American plate.
Linda, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
We are out of time, actually. So
I've loved it.
Thank you so very much, Linda Moulton Howe. And, of course, as always, we'll do it again.
All right.
So good night. And thank you for a hot night. See you later.
Thank you.
Okay, good night. Yeah, that's really it, folks. Good night from the high desert, where we are getting those swarms that Linda's talking about. Boy, we're getting a lot of swarms out here. What are we warming up for? I'm Art Bell, and this is Midnight in the Desert. Good night.